This lecture is titled Dressing Madame Butterfly. In this lecture, I will be exploring a short genealogy of the so-called Madame Butterfly narrative, focusing on John Luther Long's short story, Madame Butterfly, published in 1898. By the end of the lecture, you should be able to understand the history of the butterfly narrative in terms of Orientalism and see how each subsequent version of the narrative builds on and advances or complicates existing gendered archetypes regarding the Western imagination of the Orient. Madame Butterfly and its Orientalist legacy has long been examined by academics as one of the key texts that shaped Western attitudes towards Japan, specifically in the 19th century, in particular through the mythologization of the tragically doomed relationship between the faithful, quote-unquote, exotic Eastern woman and the white man as the nexus of a racialized and fetishized sexual fantasy. Pierre Loti in Madame Chrysantheme provides the first popularly known iteration of the butterfly myth, followed by John Luther Long's adaptation in 1989, which was then seen by the Italian composer Puccini and adapted into the opera Madama Butterfly, which is arguably the most well-known version of the narrative that exists in modern-day popular consciousness. The Madame Butterfly narrative, as is, relies on a significant marriage component between the Western man and Asian woman, along with an appropriation and imposition of identity on the quote-unquote East. In all of these versions of the narrative, the Western man is the visitor in the woman's country, but through this dynamic renders her alienated in her own home. Orientalism, as it is deployed in this lecture, refers to the term advanced by Edward Said in the aptly titled theoretical work Orientalism. The term's usage hinges on an understanding of depictions of the Orient, or the quote-unquote East, in terms of fictionality. Orientalism is an Orient as constructed by the white Western imagination. Orientalism is complicated by both a post-colonial and gendered element. The West is to male as the East is to female, revealing anxieties regarding a colonial and post-colonial other that must be conquered and dominated. Within this paradigm, the feminization and infantilization is essence of the Orient, but only to the Western imagination. Quote-unquote woman is a role designed by and performed for their benefit. If Loti, Puccini, and Long's versions of the Madame Butterfly narrative provide a more straightforward understanding of this dichotomy, at least in the iterations that remain in the popular consciousness, David Henry Hwang's post-Vietnam War stage play M. Butterfly represents a postmodern attempt to complicate and replicate this paradigm. David Henry Hwang's M. Butterfly takes place through flashbacks and imagined conversations as Pierre Gallimard attempts to piece together his relationship with Song Liling, a Chinese opera singer initially believed by the gullible French diplomat to be a woman, but in fact a man. At the end of the play, Gallimard dons Song Liling's costume and wig as Butterfly and commits suicide just as Butterfly does in the opera. The use of flashbacks, imagined conversations, and frame narrative emphasize that Gallimard's Orient is altogether a construction from the outside, and draw attention to the fact that in previous iterations of the Madame Butterfly myth, the authors of these stories were paradoxically themselves Westerners, and thus fundamentally outsiders who tried to appropriate and impose an identity on the East. In this aspect, David Henry Hwang's M. Butterfly can be read as a complication and problematization of earlier butterfly narratives. In this development of a post-Vietnam world situation, Gallimard's imperialist fantasies emerge as only being self-destructive, and in this way, David Henry Hwang's M. Butterfly presents a contrast to the imperial power or male sexuality as powerful and heterosexually stable, which was what the convention was traditionally in earlier butterfly narratives. In this way, we can understand David Henry Hwang's M. Butterfly as a step towards a significant undermining of the previous dichotomies displayed in the butterfly narratives of the past. The title of the lecture, Dressing Madame Butterfly, appears as such. There is a dressing of the narrative in that the butterfly myth and its variation through various mediums continuously represents a search for a new ending in each iteration. The butterfly narrative in Madame Chrysantheme's version starts as a comedy and then moves from tragedy to ironic farce, as can be exemplified by David Henry Hwang's version. The ending of the butterfly myth is also significant in that there are two main differences between each of these historical versions of the narrative. In the first version, we have an attempted suicide by Madame Butterfly, and in the second version, we have an actual suicide that is completed by the butterfly. The historical reality is that John Luther Long's Madame Butterfly, which was the first widely published and well-known version of the butterfly narrative, saw Cho-Cho-san, that story's Madame Butterfly, as attempting suicide, but failing to complete or failing to successfully do so. However, in popular culture, thanks to the version published by Puccini and most well-known for modern audiences, we imagine Madame Butterfly as committing suicide at the end of the story. And so this introduces a question. Does Madame Butterfly need to die? And what does this mean for David Henry Hwang's ending, which sees not Madame Butterfly's death or Song Liling's death, but Gallimard's death, but also paradoxically in a situation in which Gallimard himself dresses up as Madame Butterfly and stabs himself in the chest. In the context of David Henry Hwang's M Butterfly, we might look to Judith Butler's concept of gender trouble, or gender as act or doing, gender as performance. In Gender Trouble, Judith Butler says, constituting the identity it is purported to be in the sense gender is always a doing, though not a doing by a subject might be said to pre-exist the deed. How might we critically apply this to the butterfly narrative, specifically in the version espoused by David Henry Hwang? The other question that arises at the end of this lecture is how to save Madame Butterfly. How might we recuperate the subjective agency of the female characters in the butterfly narrative? In many versions of the butterfly myth, there are two main female characters, the butterfly and the butterfly's handmaiden. In John Luther Long's version, it is Cho-Cho and Suzuki, her handmaiden. Is the reality of the butterfly narrative different from the narrative of the butterfly narrative? And in this case, is there a sort of quasi-Orientalism happening in the audience's reception of the butterfly narrative itself? These are interesting questions to think about as we close this lecture.